Welcome again. More people might be drizzling in the next few moments, but we'll already start with a moment of centering ourselves, of grounding. Yeah, and if you feel like you can close your eyes or focus inward in whatever way is supportive for you, for us to really fully arrive here with all our being and to just take a moment to connect with ourselves so that we can really connect with one another. So my first invitation is to connect with your breath and to really focus on your in-breath and the out-breath, and using your in-breath with the intention to really be present here and now, and using the out-breath to let go of everything that has happened so far today, everything that might still happen later on today. And using the breath as our anchor to always come back to when we notice that we're drifting off. And allowing our breath to guide us deeper, breathing in deeply and softening our belly if it's available to us to allow the breath naturally to flow deeper. And we can even imagine our breath to flow all the way down into our feet and through our feet into the earth, anchoring us, grounding us, feeling our sit bones, feeling our feet on the earth, and feeling our roots going deep down into the core of this planet. And as we continue to breathe and to expand, really creating space, expanding our chest and creating space between our cells of our body. Widening our energy bodies and taking up space intentionally. And with every out breath, we continue to let go and to release anything that has been stagnant, that isn't serving us in our bodies anymore. And we can take a moment to scan our physical being for any tensions, any contractions or places where we might be holding, scanning our head, our shoulders, our jaw, and relaxing, softening if it's available to us. Scanning our arms, our upper bodies, our bellies. And letting go, releasing. Moving down through our hips, our upper legs, our thighs, and our knees. Creating space with the in-breath and relaxing with the out-breath. And finally down to our calves, our feet. And softening and surrendering. And then finally, I invite you to connect with your heart and to feel your physical heart, the heartbeat of your own heart in your chest. Noticing the aliveness, the pulsation. And also expanding your awareness to the heartbeat of our group, becoming aware that all of our hearts are beating together. And that even though we're not sharing the same physical space and we're bridging many continents, we can still feel our collective heartbeat, knowing that all our hearts are beating, that the same awareness is present in all of us, and the same life force is moving through all of us. and feeling our group body, and feeling the presence of all of us with our eyes still closed, our focus still inward, expanding our awareness already to this group. Hmm. And then while being connected with yourself, being connected with the group, I invite us to take a few more breaths together. Hmm. And then slowly preparing yourself to come back to this shared space. And whenever you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes again and have a look around who's here with us today. I had the impulse to bring those people that I've been working with this year, that I've been collaborating with, that I've been in coaching conversations with together, because so much of what is happening on this planet is something that we cannot do alone, where many of the things that are moving through us are not just individual, but are also collective. And we are not meant to do this work alone. And so I feel very honored to have you here to share this space. And I want to share our little presentation. I actually prepared some slides even, which is unusual for the way how I work. And I want to give a bit of context for what I see is happening in the world and what I see is happening in many of us as a little exploration. And then we'll move into the gathering part where there'll be breakout rooms and the opportunity to connect with one another in smaller groups. And then we'll also have an open space for those who still want and can stay longer to also have more of a free flowing interaction with each other. As a little housekeeping or logistics, I'm recording this call so that I can send it to those people who were on the list and who couldn't make it today. And I'll probably also share the presentation on YouTube. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. So that is the space where you can exchange freely without thinking about who might else be seeing that. If you can, it would be great to have your camera on so that you can really be present with us. And it also supports that we're not multitasking in parallel. Know how easy it is to be tempted to do other things in parallel if the camera is off. And if you cannot turn on your camera, that's also totally fine. It's just an invitation. And especially for the breakout rooms, it's great if you can show yourself there to others. Yeah, so I'll see if that presentation is working as intended. Hope you can see my screen now. And what I want to start with is this quote by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who says, "Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire." For the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. And I believe that we are at this threshold, where we are, through the circumstances that we have created on this planet, are in a way forced to move beyond just mastering the world of matter. And I'll share a bit more of where I see this quote coming in at a later point. But to give you a bit of an overview, I briefly shared already what my intention for today is. I'll give you this brief theoretical framing where I talk about how the solution is the problem, and how we can move beyond the solutionism and actionism and actually face our monsters. After this presentation, there'll be an opportunity to share questions, to have a group reflection, and also an opportunity to go a little deeper into a short coaching opportunity if anyone feels called to reflect on how it's relating also to your life. And then I'll guide the breakout rooms with some questions that you can connect with others and get to know the other people here in the space. And then we'll open up the space for whoever wants to stay for this community hangout. So when I speak about the solution is the problem, one of the roles that I have as a coach is to be very aware of how my clients might want to enroll me into their story. And many of the things that people come with, it's just a list of examples, is the idea of wanting to live a life of more purpose, doing work that feels meaningful but struggling to make money, and the difficulties of too much work, being stressed out despite being in a self-employed situation, the difficulties asking for support, and the desire to please others, and also the self-doubt, the insecurities that many of the people that I work with have, despite being extraordinary high achievers, as you would probably call them in the business world. So if I would jump on these problems and solve these problems for the clients, I would, in a way, stay within the frame of the question. And I believe um, the problem is already in the question, what should I do about this? And Bioaccumulafis says so beautifully, the way we respond to crisis is part of the crisis. So my intention with the work that I do is not to help caterpillars become super caterpillars. It's to move from being a caterpillar to become a butterfly. And that's a fundamental difference. It's an entirely new being that doesn't come from doing more caterpillar things. It's doing something entirely different that isn't necessarily even so much in the doing. That is a lot more about a quality of being. And so to already hint at the deeper layer that I'll be expanding on a bit more, it's not necessarily so much about the doing because we're moving into the territory of relationships. If we look at all of these challenges and problems that the people I work with come with, it's at the root all about relationships. And relationships at best are not a place for doing, it's a place for being. And so how can we be different rather than do different to solve these problems? So this transformational journey of the caterpillar requires that we go to a deeper level, that we don't satisfy ourselves with staying at the surface and doing incremental optimization. It's about playing an entirely different game. An image that I want to use as an analogy is from treating the symptoms to resolving the underlying dynamics. If you imagine a pipe system where there's a lot of pressure on the water pipes and you plug a cork on one side of the system in, then inevitably the pressure comes out on other sides. So we might think we have solved the problem if we don't want water to come out leaking by putting in a blockage at one part of the system, but at best we're just shifting the symptom to a different part of the entire system. And so we need to go to the root and see why is there even so much pressure on the system? How can we turn off the water if we don't want water to be leaking, as an analogy? So I want to take you onto this deeper dive beneath the surface to see where are all these problems originating from. And it takes us to a very personal level and our early childhood, where we are confronted with a choice that is, in a way, an impossible choice for any child to make. Because as children, we are in desperate need of the connection of our caregivers, of our parents. And we crave that and we need it for our survival, and we're dependent on the special relationship of our parents. And so, in order to get that, we would do anything that we can to receive that love, appreciation, and attention from our parents. And so, if we learn that certain behaviors are accepted or lead to receiving that attention, then we are even willing to sacrifice our autonomy We have two main needs, and that is the one for connection and the one for autonomy or authenticity and expressing ourselves. But if we're in a conflict around that and we feel that who we are in our authenticity and our autonomy is not received, is not welcomed, or our parents cannot meet us there, then we have to sacrifice our authenticity in order to receive that connection. So, for example, if we as children are very angry and our parents have challenges embodying, embracing their own anger or don't want us to be angry or loud or taking up space, then we learn very quickly to adapt and to become quiet, to make ourselves smaller, to be more pleasing, or we learn to, if our parents are struggling, to find ways to rescue them and develop all kinds of strategies that help us to get the attention and the love that we need. Or we become rebels if we feel that we need to fight for attention. But all of these responses are the basic trauma responses on the level of fight, flight, freeze, or manipulate. And so as a child, it's just a pseudo solution because it doesn't really work to help us to become whole integrated human beings. There is a fragmentation that happens. We see one part of us that is acceptable and one part that isn't acceptable. And we create this fragmentation in our psyche. And it's the journey of a lifetime to integrate that again. But as children, we see our parents as gods, and we cannot accept, we cannot even afford to believe that our parents might be deficient in some way, that they might be wrong, that they might make mistakes. And so we automatically redirect our anger at ourselves instead of at our parents. We redirect our self-doubt at ourselves instead of our parents. And so these are the patterns that we then keep recreating all our lives. And they show up in our business relationships, they show up in our romantic relationships, they show up in our friendships in some form or another. So we create all these strategies in our early childhood, but they become, in a way, our identity. So this complex of strategies that we developed in order to survive in early childhood become our strategies, or what you could also call our ego, because we identify so much with that. And some people get really good at that. They develop this drive to perform, which is highly appreciated in our society. And this performance-based love that they receive from that is then, in a way, impacting their career in oftentimes positive ways in our culture, but it also doesn't lead to the deep sense of fulfillment. If we're just striving for performance, but don't have that innate sense of belonging and love that we hope to get from that, because it will inevitably never be enough. And so what happens from this place when we have a culture of people who have that fragmented psyche is that as soon as we look at our global world, then we can see that on a global level, we have a lot of leaders who never really learned how to connect with themselves and to connect with others in a true and authentic way, but who respond oftentimes from their basic survival instincts of fight, flight, freeze, manipulate. And we have a society of followers who follow without questioning these leaders because they learned to obey, they learned to suppress their authenticity. If we were truly healed from our trauma, we wouldn't be able to survive and function in today's society because there were so many things where we feel that we're not okay with that. Our moral compass would let us know that this is not okay. We don't want to support this kind of a system. So one of the theses that I want to present here is that every global problem that we see in the world is a result of the lack of empathy and connection that we have, because no one would be able to do what we're doing to the planet, to do to other people, if we were truly feeling empathically what we're doing to other people. And so, in a way, even just growing up in our society, we need to fragment ourselves from our hearts, from our capacity to feel what is going on in order to move along with what's happening. And so, if we from that place then, however, try to solve any global problem, we'll just aggravate the situation. If we fight climate change, if we fight injustice, if we fight genocide, then it's another response on that surface level of trying to, in a way, fight the shadows on the wall. But the real source, the deeper cause, is never addressed, and that is the deeper disconnect. And Otto Scharmer calls it these three divides that we have: the ecological divide, we have the social divide, and we have the spiritual divide, where we've separated ourselves from our ecological environment and the modern human world, where we've divided and fragmented ourselves from our brothers and sisters on the globe, and where we've had that spiritual divide, where we've separated ourselves from God and our true essence. And so I would say that we can only do to others what we're also doing to ourselves. We have that emotional blind spot. If we're directing anger towards ourselves, then we cannot fully be empathic with others, and we will, in a way, direct that anger against others as well. And then we find all kinds of rationalizations. If we use our mind, if we need to cut ourselves off from the heart and use our mind as the compass. And so we find all kinds of logical explanations and reasons that make rationally perfect sense. Well, we have all these practical constraints and system logic within where people can justify for themselves that they are the good guys, that they have the best intentions in mind, even if they're a CEO of a corporation that is destroying the planet, they can justify for themselves and come we're doing. There are very few people who are actually convinced that they're bad guys. And so to recognize that it's coming back from that root, that we, in a way, use our mind to make moral decisions, but that's not what the mind is good for. We need to use our hearts to be the moral compass and allow the mind then to find a way how to make that happen. So what we see in the world is basically a perpetuation of what we experienced in our early childhood. And so the kind of leadership coaching that I offer, in contrast to a more performance-based coaching that optimizes our coping mechanisms and that gets us to perform better in a completely sick society, and the whole endeavor of awakening and becoming more aware of our unconscious patterns, is not just a personal exploration that is a self-gratifying private endeavor. It's really a political post-activism that ideally decolonializes our minds and makes us become aware that we need our hearts to allow to break open again. On a global scale, I would even go so far as to say that there was never really peace in our recorded history. That we've always, at best, had absence of kinetic war. We look at Europe for the last 60 years, at least in Central Europe, then it might have been the absence of war, but it's not peace. For me, peace is the reign of love. And we can see how we've had these codependent entanglements with other nation states where, in a way, yes, we've plugged a cork in one side of the system, but it's coming out in all kinds of other ways, and it's becoming more and more obvious how fragile that peace that was, agreed upon after the Second World War in Central Europe. And so the only way to truly resolve any conflict is to release the trapped energy, the trapped emotions that are underlying that dynamic. And once that stored energy that is trapped in the collective, that is trapped in the system, it becomes this alchemical transmutation, where we can turn the heaviness, the lead, the lesser material into the gold. And we can turn conflict into peace. But in order to do that, it needs to be fully expressed. And that has never really happened. The grief, the terror, the anger, the sadness, the pain, the helplessness on a collective level has never been fully expressed because as individuals, we never really learned to express it. And by expressing, I don't mean acting out, but bringing it into relation, right? To be seen for who we truly are with our deepest, most difficult core emotions. And so I believe that we need to start very much on the personal level, that we need to start with our most intimate relationships in our families, in our partnerships, in our professional relationships. But inevitably, this will also have to lead to a more global reconciliation process where all these voices need to be heard, need to be expressed, where there needs to be collective grieving, where there needs to be a collective um, atonement process as well for all the things that have been passed on from generation to generation. So if we try to fight the problems on this surface level, the distorted expression of these energies that are trapped in the system will create even more imbalances and at best just be shifted to a different level. And so, yeah, to emphasize again, I see that every global problem is the lack of empathy as a result, and is the lack of connection. And just as we have this fragmentation within us, we recreate that fragmentation in the world. But what is happening now? And the process for the last few decades that has been amplifying and is coming to deeper intensity, I believe, is that there is a deeper awakening process of this planet that is not just happening in us individuals, that is also happening on this alive Earth. That this planet is going through a process of awakening that is initiated through a purging, where we have what Otto Schama also calls this involution, where the inside is being turned out and the outside is turned in. This crisis that is a birthing process, where there is this evolutionary opportunity for us to create something that has never been accomplished in the history of recorded mankind. And so as everything is coming to the surface and the inside is showing on the outside, and we can see it so more clearly how all the suppressed anger is just almost exploding through politicians that are getting more aggressive, through expressions of war and kinetic conflict in the world. We can also see that there is a turning away from this outer expansion of material abundance that has come to an absurd point of over amplification, where we've been focusing so much on material abundance, but where we now need to turn inward and really recognize that we need to come from the expansion of material abundance to this inner exploration of enoughness, and to see we have enough, how we are enough, and how from that place we can create a whole new level of wealth. But the biggest shift that is in a way symbolizing all of that is the shift from our head and our minds to the heart, and really sinking deeper into that. So that's the predicament that we're in. And then I already hinted a little bit at how to move forward with this. What is the solution to move on? And I want to bring in the term of the monster. And I like the definition of Bayo Akomolafe, who says monsters are these threshold beings, the symbols of the other. And so in order to heal that fragmentation within and around us, we need to invite these monsters. We need to face these monsters that exist at the edges of our understanding, that are these entities that force us to reconsider what is normal, human, or real. And so what I, in this context, specifically see as these monsters are the parts of us that we thought in the past would lead us to being abandoned, lead us to certain death. And if we let these monsters out, if we show ourselves with these aspects, it would be our end. And so to reflect, we can think back, who did I have to be in my childhood? Or what were the strategies that I learned that kept me self, that kept me receiving love? And admittedly, to embark on this process is a death process. It feels like dying because on one hand, we're confronting that deep-seated fear in our body of dying if we do these things and not receive the conditional love that we used to get from these strategies, but it's the death of our old strategies. No, it's the death of our ego and not of our essence, not of our bodies. And so facing our monsters and allowing ourselves in safe connections to meet these monsters is to be seen for who we really are. If we show ourselves with our most core taboo emotions, oftentimes that is our anger, that is our sadness, that is our helplessness, then that can transform, starting from the more intimate, safe relationships in our families, uh, and then expanding through our professional relationships and bringing more of who we are into connection, into authenticity. And it's a complete pattern interrupt in a way, moving away from the performance-based identity of who we thought we need to be to receive love and the doing things in order to get love, to naturally being more of who we are and allowing and surrendering into that. And it's also the shift from narcissism to empathy. So, in a way, narcissism, in this context, I don't use it as a personality disorder that a few people have, but it's a spectrum. In a way, our inability to feel others and to feel other people's emotion, and therefore being able to do hurtful things to them. Only hurt people can hurt people. And so to move from narcissism to empathy is the recognition that I can only do to others what I'm already doing to myself. And we can see that whenever we see someone in the world doing hurtful things, A Course in Miracle says it's either an act of love or an outcry for love. And so coming to this deeper understanding that I am you and you are me, and all the lost and lonely parts within myself are also representative of the lost and lonely people in this world. And developing a deeper empathy for ourselves necessarily then also expands our heart, expands our compassion for the world around us and for the people that we previously had difficulties having empathy with. And I've been through a few weeks of really intense insights and at times really humbling moments to see how I have hurt other people in my life. And to see that I was only able to abandon people and hurt people that I deeply love because I was abandoning myself. I was only able to act in hurtful ways and to express my anger in passive aggressive ways because that's how I've been treating myself. How I have been shaming and judging myself and directing that anger against myself. I was only able to do it to others because I was already doing it to myself and therefore had that emotional blind spot where I couldn't see, where I couldn't feel what I'm doing to others. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to hurt them in the way that I did. And so it's a deeply humbling process, but at the same time expanding our capacity for love, for empathy, for the people who we might judge in the world who say, like, how can they possibly do that? Yeah, if we look at the childhood that they have had, and this idea of empathy, if you would have walked in this person's shoes, then you probably would have acted very similarly. It's not because they're inherently bad, it's because they experienced really bad things in their life. And so it's a very different approach to become from this place. It's a very different approach to our colonialized material mindset. We're shifting away from needing to control life, needing to control the material universe to a deeper level of trust. And it amplifies the need to surrender our ego to something bigger, to the divine. In the past, we received the safety through controlling our behavior and therefore controlling the behavior of others, manipulating others, pleasing others, and trying to get a response from them that is meeting our needs. But I believe in the future, more and more, if we step out of these codependent relationships that we've been having with our intimate partners, with our family members, with our colleagues, with authorities. The more we empower ourselves and rediscover our power, this safety that we've been trying to control life comes from within, through not censoring ourselves so much anymore, through not disconnecting and fragmenting ourselves and labeling our parts as good and bad and acceptable and non-acceptable, but to trust and surrender that if we show ourselves more authentically, more fully, then people will, yeah, also in some way at times maybe even leave our lives that are not in resonance with that, but the people who stay in our lives, they'll be the true connections that are really meant to be with us along that path and who are there with us to create this new way of being together. And it's a moment of choice to really see who do we want to surround ourselves with, and are we willing to step into this uncertainty of this present moment where we don't act from our strategies, but we act from our true impulse of life. And so moving into these authentic connections with myself, with God, and with others leads to a deeper innate sense of worthiness, of enoughness, where we don't need others, where we don't need the special relationships, as A Course in Miracle calls it, that need to fulfill all our emotional needs. But we recognize that this conditional love that is based on my behavior wasn't really fulfilling anyways. And we can now as adults meet our needs through multiple people, and we don't have to bend in order to be who we think we need to be in order to receive love, but we receive a more unconditional love if we're not distorting the energy flow within us. And so the last slide that I want to share with you is a quote from Adyashanti, who says, "The purpose of the spiritual search is to exhaust the seeker." The purpose of the spiritual search is to exhaust the seeker. So in a way, there is nothing to find because it was always there, and it's just admitting the defeat and the failure of all our strategies. To recognize that we've tried so hard all our lives to be someone that if we check all the boxes of society and the expectations of other people, then we will finally be loved. But once we come to this point where we oftentimes, after a journey of long suffering, recognize that we're just too exhausted. We cannot keep it up anymore. Adyashanti also says, when you're completely and absolutely trapped, you're free. When you're completely and absolutely trapped, you're free because you don't have any energy to maintain that strategy anymore that kept you at distance from the intimacy and immediacy with life. If you have nothing left to lose, then something opens up. And what seems like falling into empty space, into the abyss, becomes an experience of being carried and floating and being held by something bigger. And so in a way, we're cutting out the middleman. We've had all these strategies that if we perform well, if we just earn enough money, if we just sacrifice our own needs enough, then we will finally be loved, then we will finally be seen by others, then others will finally give us what we hope to get, and they will know better what we need than we know ourselves. If we cut out these middlemen and directly go for what we want, if we express our boundaries and use our anger to say what we're not okay with anymore, if we use our sadness to point us towards our longing, to show us where our needs are not met and where we long for more, if we learn to show ourselves more directly with that and don't use these indirect strategies, we in a way save a lot of energy because we don't need these middlemen of passive strategies anymore. And we also can admit to ourselves the price that we've paid for keeping these strategies alive in our personal context. So there was a lot of input and a lot of also very heady information talking about the necessity of moving into the heart. So I invite us to a moment of stillness, a moment of silence, and to just feel in our bodies what is happening right now, especially tuning in with our hearts to see what is alive after this impulse and taking a few breaths. Mm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and before we move into the breakout rooms, I want to invite us to share any reflections, any questions that might have come alive for you, any experiences from your life, how it relates to your own life and where you are in your journey at the moment. Also, if you want to explore deeper, this is an opportunity to go into a conversation around this before we dive into the breakout rooms.
I've just realized how mind-boggling it was for me to hear you speaking about exactly my personal experience, although we've spoken a few times, and of course we have been connected for some years now, but the way how you've now put it into your words and shared it from your perspective, that was really very, very um, much resonating with me, and it's more or less what we speak about in the famous LDI, which you know, exactly that thing. And what brought me to a really different space was when the two sentences, when we're totally trapped, we're free. So I have to still resonate with that. I have to still think, well, sit with that. And the second sentence, this the spiritual surge is the exhaustion, or the sense of the spiritual surge is exhaustion. So that was, again, I haven't fully integrated that, but I'm really, so that was that will be sitting with me for some time now. Maybe to the breakout. Let's see.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
What came up for me, I kind of had this like, oh wow, that is so familiar moment. Was this idea of um, there's no energy anymore to keep up the strategy or the mask. That totally resonates with me in dancing. Whenever I go to like a community event where we dance 4 or 5 days in a row, I'm usually really sleep deprived by the last day, and the last night is always the one where it feels like a part of me is too tired to keep up my mask of shame or feeling judged. So I feel the most free, and I feel, yeah, the most alive and the most myself. So that was interesting for me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I had to think back of our last conversation where you noted when I allow myself to be silent and I judge myself for being silent. And the last days with my mother, I came back from traveling to be with my mother for some time. And then I would also see myself judging certain actions around her, judging myself. That the words that you said, like, if we keep being angry at ourselves, we can be really empathetic to others. It really hits home because I've also been thinking about solving world's problems, but it starts from the end. Yeah, thank you.
Um, when you were speaking about how what really is the solution of everyone turning inwards and basically connecting to their hearts and becoming empathetic to then the world around from tuning into their inner selves and connecting with the spirits and the love that they are. This connected to a very powerful man who my mom told me about, who has been freediving with whales, and he has a very deep connection with these whales. And he asked the whales, what can he do to help the world, to help the oceans, to help them, to help their health? And the whales responded with, help everyone to connect with the love that they are. But support people in healing.
Fortunately, you're cutting off a bit. The last thing that I heard was help people to connect with the love that they are.
I'm
The image is frozen right now. Give it a moment to see if it comes back. Yeah, and I think it's so
Okay.
There you are again. Beautiful. Yes. Connect with the love that they are. The message from the whales. That was the last thing that I heard.
Yeah. Message from the whales.
Was there anything else you wanted to share?
Well, I don't exactly know what you left off, what I left off at, but just basically that the whales basically said exactly what you said, that the it's not to try and fix the outside world, but to bring people to their hearts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and by turning inwards and showing ourselves with that, I think it's such an essential move. I'm feeling touched as I imagine that. If more of us could really show our inner movings that we've been trying to hide because we were so afraid that we'd be judged or rejected if we do that. But I see that there's such a deep healing in that. So it's not just turning inward and hiding in a cave, but it's turning inward and bringing out, having this involution process where we've been taking in the world and turning it against us in a way. It's now taking our hearts and bringing it out into the world, with all the vulnerability that requires, and the safety in the connections that we have around us. So I don't recommend this process to anyone going out in the streets and sharing with everyone, but to really focus on the people first that we care about, that we want to have these deep and safe relationships with, and being the pattern interrupt in the field, or maybe at times where it hasn't been a usual practice to show yourself with that, to go into the giving the trust first, to see if others want to follow that invitation. Beautiful to hear the resonance from the whales. Thank you for sharing that.
I want to share. First of all, thank you, because everything you shared just definitely resonated with me and my experience in life. My teachers in this case are cats, because I'm a very big cat person, because they, for me, they embody the essence of unconditional love, which starts in self-care and self-love, because they, like, left to their own devices, they take care of themselves. Like, just watching a cat, like, cleaning itself in the sun, because they're taking care of themselves, it gives so much beauty and joy and love just watching that. And as somebody who started this process of self-discovery and transformation almost 30 years ago or so, I just want to share that it's extremely difficult only the first time. Like the first time you go through that metamorphosis of shedding the old skin and shedding the old programming, it's like you said, it's like facing your own death, because it's the death of who you've been all your life up until that point. However, because we're humans and we're always changing, this, in my experience, like the second or the third, like when I went through other transformations, it's actually much easier. It becomes like, oh, I know how that works. I'm gonna, lose some friends and gain new more, but I know that it's actually better for me. So, and the most frustrating part is seeing loved ones and people I care around me who are so afraid to take that first step. And no matter how much I, encourage them or show them by example, or just like, comfort them that it's actually brighter on the other side, and you have more freedom and self-expression on the other side of that wall, they cannot muster the courage within themselves to take that step. So living with that is actually the most painful part. So thank you for hand-holding people through that first threshold.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I feel you in that. And there is no remedy for that. It's really, again, feeling the depth of our sadness, of how alone and helpless we feel, and how that reverberates also as experiences that live deep in our bodies. That the experience of not being with the people that we love is also something that we, yeah, in a way, are deeply familiar with in this society and through our Conditioning. Thank you for being here, Angelina.
Yeah, in the name of honoring our vulnerability, this moment I feel really shy about speaking, which is weird because I usually take a lot of space in groups. And so I want to acknowledge this shyness. And also I believe it is from feeling all the power in this space, all the fantastic beings that you are. I'm like, oh, who am I in this space? So that's where it all comes in. And one thing that resonates a lot with me and what you shared this morning, for me, it's the morning, Jonathan, is the notion of empathy. And what is coming as I listen to all of you is everyone has a story that resonates in a way with my own disconnection or my own past. So through all the fragments I'm receiving from the group, I can feel the healing within myself, the reintegration, and that's what I'm inviting also for the rest of our time together, connecting with that deep empathy with the other person's story. So with the shyness, I'm also excited to be here and excited for this process of inner transformation and of being together.
Beautiful. Yeah, and thank you also for presencing yourself with the more tender feelings of shyness. And one of the things that I want to add to what you're sharing, because it points towards the potential of what happens when we deepen our capacity to empathy. I feel that we're just at the beginning of recognizing what the human potential is. And it again refers to this quote by Talat de Chardin, to really harness the power of love for God and to using this energy in a way that is almost like discovering fire for the second time. I really feel that there is a time ahead of us that can only be described as a miracle. And we need miracles because from our minds don't know how to solve the global crises and the personal challenges that we're going through. And so to recognize that there is a potential that I and many of you probably also have tasted already that happens when we truly connect to this deeper level of empathy, instead of trying to find solutions on the symptom level where it seems impossible. If we drop to this level of vulnerability and meet each other there, if we open our empathic capacities, all of a sudden agreements and conflicts dissolve, and we find something where I feel you just as I feel myself. And then I come into this place where I want the best for you and I feel that you want the best for me. And we come to a true resolution, the reign of love instead of just the absence of war. And I feel that that is what we need to really align the collective co-creative powers of humanity. And in some relationships, I feel this opening up more and more quickly. And so that gives me a lot of hope.
Can I ask a question? When was the first time the fire? I remember I wanted to ask this anyway. Someone always said it's the second time we experienced fire. What was the first time?
So Tyler de Chardin refers to the actual discovery of fire, when sometime in
Ah,
human
that
history
was
the Neanderthals discovered literal fire, and
okay.
then that was such a pivotal and momentous shift for our evolution that
Okay.
he compares what's ahead of us once we
So it
move
was
beyond
not
just
a
mastering the matter.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, okay. Now I get it. Okay. Yeah. I thought there was a moment which he refers to, but yeah, to the literal
Yeah.
development and just realizing fire with the power of fire. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, unless anyone else wants to share something here in the group at this point, I think Tim, you also presented a beautiful transition to the breakout rooms where we can meet in more intimate spaces and share ourselves a bit more personally if we would like to.